All right, welcome everybody to our 2:30 talk. Our speaker is Chloe Messdaghi. Yes. And she will be talking on the Hacker Hippocampus, Meet Your Brain on Games. And I'll turn over to you.
Excellent. Thanks for the intro. Hi, everyone. I'm excited to do this talk with you. This is going to be a completely gamified talk virtually, so work with me here, but I hope to keep you awake throughout this whole talk. So first things first, I'm going to just go into my slides, so hold on one sec.
I forgot we should probably share those.
Yeah, there we go. Can you see my screen? Excellent. All right. Welcome to the Hacker Hippocampus. If you have not seen this talk before, it's a completely gamified talk on gamification in infosec. All right. So for those that don't know who I am an infosec advocate and activist. That's basically what I do all the time, 24/7, because it's security. But also a VP of strategy over at Point3 Security as my day job. I'm also the president and co-founder of WOSEC, also the founder of We Are Hackers, formerly known as Women Hackers, also the co-founder of Hacking Is Not a Crime, and also one of the Hacker Book Club organizers. And also I do a podcast with Alyssa Miller and Phil Wiley for ITSP Magazine, and it's called The Uncommon Journey. That is my URL. If you want to learn anything about me, it is on there, personal and non-personal items. That is my Twitter and Instagram. My DMs are always open, but feel free to follow for weird content all the time. So let's dive into the real reason why you're here. So what we're going to do is talk about the history of gamification. Now, this is the driest part of my entire talk. But if you pay attention, you may be able to win something. That's right. So pay attention and maybe you'll win something. The next thing is that we're going to talk about how our brains are stimulated by it. So why are we so stimulated by gamification? Why is it so successful? We're going to dive into that. And if you've seen any of my other talks, it's always I bring into cognitive science, because when we know how humans behave and how our brain functions, we have a better idea of how this world works, how humans work. And also, if you're a social engineer, you need to know those things too. Also, we're going to dive into why gamification helps security teams, the latest statistics and research, and also how gamification has transformed lives within InfoSec. And then last but not least, I will definitely leave some space for a Q&A. So remember, you have to pay attention throughout the whole thing so then you can win something, but also not just that, because this entire talk, I'm going to ask you questions. And I'm going to keep track of those that respond to those questions. So first things first, what exactly is gamification? So gamification is the process of adding games or game-like elements to something such as a task so as to encourage participation. Like I just said earlier, is if you pay attention, you might win something. So there we go. I have a game-like element right there for you. And I've added games throughout this whole talk because I'm going to encourage your participation virtually. All right, so we're going to first dive into the history of gamification. Once again, this is the driest part of my entire talk, but if you pay attention to the details, you may win something. So first thing, we're going to go over this beautiful graph right here, which is the history of gamification. So remember, pay attention to details. So in 425 BC, dice games were created to fight major famine. And in 3100 BC, the first board game was created in Egypt. And S&H green stamp, marketers basically for the first time ever sold stamps to retailers who used them to reward customers. And in 1958, the first video game was invented. And Charles Cardo, he founded a consulting firm called The Game of Work. And it brings basically this feedback loops found in sports into the workplace. That's right. He noticed that sports in workplace somehow encourages participation more. MUD1 is created by Roy Trubshaw at Essex University. It was the first multi-user virtual world game. Now, Thomas Malone publishes What Makes Things Fun to Learn, a study of intrinsically motivating computer games. And in 1981, the first ever 3D video games were actually released. Now, at this point, American Airlines was looking around and like, well, why don't we introduce something where our customers, basically, the more they fly on our airline, that they get some sort of benefit out of it. And they introduced Advantage, the first frequent flyer program, and other airlines, of course, followed it. But as you know, in the travel industry, tourism and whatnot, also hotels noticed that's kind of a brilliant idea. Why aren't we doing that for whenever the customers come and stay at our hotels? So Holiday Inn launched the very first ever hotel loyalty program. And of course, with tourism, it followed with rental cars. So National Car Rental launched the first ever car rental rewards program. Now, at this point, 30% of Americans households owned an NES, and a new generation of gamers was now born. Richard Bartle, he publishes Who Plays MUAs, which divided video game players into 4 unique personality types. That's right. It's a personality type kind of quiz. You can look it up and see which one you are more like. But then in 2002, Serious Gaming Initiatives forged a link between the gaming industry, training, health, education, and public policy. And then now at this point, they needed a word for it. So in 2003, Nick Pelling basically coined the term gamification. And in 2007, Bunchball created Dunder Mifflin Infinity. It's a gamified website for the TV show The Office. It received over 8 million page views within 6 weeks. Clearly, they were on to something. And in 2009, Quest Learn accepts a class of 6th graders into a game-based learning environment. And in 2010, DevHub adds a point system to its website and increases its user engagement by 70%. And other companies started noticing and started doing it too. In 2010, Gamification Co. holds the first ever gamification summit. Guess where? San Francisco, of course. And in 2012, 45,000 enroll in Professor Kevin Werbach's online gamification course through Coursera. And in 2012, Mozilla Open Badges Initiative is launched. The open source badges can be used to mark accomplishments online, which we see today. In 2012, Gartner predicted that 70% of the global 2,000 organizations will have at least one gamified application by 2014. And in 2014, M2 Research predicts that gamification will be a $2.8 billion industry by 2016, which is true, but it went even beyond that. And right now, by the end of 2020, it's expected to be an $11 billion industry. So I hope you're paying attention because that was the driest part, but let's do this. So remember pop quiz? I know you're like, no, I hate pop quiz. This is like having a nightmare where you're in a classroom and you didn't know there was a final. And then next thing you know, you're in your underwear and you're not, and that's embarrassing. I hate those dreams. And I know you all have this too. Also, like losing teeth, that's another, I hate that one too. Anyway, we're going to do some pop quiz time. Now, how are you going to participate? Remember, the person who is participating the most and also providing the most accurate responses will actually get a prize at the end. So first things first, in the comment section, tell me, in what year did the first video game come out? In what year did the first video come out? I should play a Jeopardy sound. I think that would help a lot. All right, it's 1958. Next question. In what country invented the first board game? Egypt. Now, which airline did the first frequent flyer program? Do you guys remember? Which airlines was it? American Airlines. So who coined the term gamification? I know this one is the hardest one usually. Who was that person who came up with the term gamification? It was Nick Pelling. Nick Pelling. All right. What was the gamified website by Bunchball for the TV show The Office called? Dunder Mifflin Infinity. Now, next question for you. I think this is the last of the pop quiz for now, but Gamification is expected to become a what billion-dollar industry by the end of 2020? What is it? It's $11 billion. All right. End of pop quiz time. But, it could be a mystery. I might do it and later, you never know. But if you're a Monty Python fan like myself, I give you a virtual high five because Monty Python made 2020 a way better year for me. All right. The fact, though, you should know about gamification. You know about the history now, just in general about gamification. But the thing we all kind of know is that infosec has always been gamified. Think about it. We have CTFs, we have hackathons, we have bug bounty, and many of us ended up becoming hackers because, we wanted to be better than our peers when it came to games. We'd find cheat codes, we'd find other methods to make sure that we could beat our friends. But most importantly, the other thing is that many of us, we love it. The hunt for the vulnerabilities, seeing how far does the foxhole goes. And in contrast, it's basically just the always thinking, how can I outsmart this and that? And that itself, that type of thought is a gamified thought. How do I outmaneuver this? So, of course, I have to put something together here on when it comes to gamification. Here's the gamification timeline for infosec. So on October 10th, 1995, Netscape launches the first ever cash rewards for finding security bugs in their Netscape Navigator 2.0. It was very successful that other companies realized, why aren't we doing this too? Now, the first DEF CON CTF was in 1996 itself. And now, because of Netscape's success, they decided to create their own bug bounty program. So from 2002 to 2011, companies would run and manage their own bug bounty program in-house. Also, Pawn to Own started in 2007. Now, let's go back to that bug bounty program situation. So the one thing you need to note is that around 2012, 2013 was the birth of the bug bounty program platforms that we know today, such as Bugcrowd, HackerOne, and Synack in that exact order. Now, the thing to note about it is that previously it was like Google, Facebook, and Mozilla were running their own, but it's a lot of work. And so what ended up happening was that these platforms came about and was like, hey, we're going to create this bilateral trust agreement between the organization and the hacker community. And we'll be the middleman in the middle to make sure that communication is flowing in a good manner, but also know that everyone is on the same page of what are the rules. And it was so successful that companies now all around the world have bug bounty programs and vulnerability disclosure policies because of it, because it is successful. And think about it, with bug bounty, how it works, if you break it down, it's simple. You want to be the first one to find that vulnerability. You also want to find the P1 of the vulnerabilities, so you get paid even more. So it's all about speed and also getting the higher amount. So that in itself is gamification. Now, when it comes to 2014 and where we are today, is that gamification has basically been used for training as well. And it's been on the rise. And that's one of the things that Point 3 Security does, is that we provide a gamified ecosystem to upskill. And other companies are also doing other things such as that. But it definitely does work. Now, we're going to dive into a little bit more of a pop quiz. So remember, if you're paying attention, respond in the comments, and I'll look through them after I give the talk to find out who won. So first things first, the first bug bounty program was created in what year? In what year? Remember that Netscape Navigator 2.0 beta? What year was that? 1995. When was the first CTF at DEF CON? When was that? 1996. So that is the end of the pop quiz time. And now you've learned the history. You've learned how infosec works when it comes to gamification. But now we're going to dive into your brain. So we're going to deep dive into your brain, and there's going to be activities throughout it to show you how it works. So we're going to be stimulating certain regions of your brain in this section, so you have a better understanding of how your brain actually works. So first things first, we're going to get to know your brain. But what I want you to understand is that those pop quiz questions themselves, they stimulate this one particular area of your brain which thrives in gamification. And this part of the brain is called the temporal lobe. If you see on the left, it's the green section saying temporal lobe. That's what you're going to focus on today. It's that part of the brain that is stimulated through gamification because it works with memory. It also works with your senses. So memory, senses, and response, emotions, and all that are all within the temporal lobe. And we're going to dive into that. But if you also see on the other side of this image, you see this part says the hippocampus and amygdala. So both those sections are within the temporal lobe. But first, let's dive into temporal lobe. Then we're going to dive into the hippocampus and the amygdala, because those are all important parts for you to understand gamification. So first things first, what is the temporal lobe? So the temporal lobe is located within your brain, of course, in the middle part, but is involved in processing sensory input into derived meanings for the appropriate retention of visual memory, language comprehension, and emotion association. And this is where gamification thrives and where the amygdala and hippocampus are. So we're going to do a quick activity so you could get to know your temporal lobe. So first things first, take a deep breath. All right, so this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to read you a description of a word, and you're going to tell me what that thing is. Okay, so it's not really a word, it's an object. So the one thing to note is that you can put in your answers, and I will count those as points towards getting a prize. So you can either shout it out verbally in your own home and scare your own pets, or you can actually just type it in silently. All right. So the reason I'm doing this activity, just for you to remember, the temporal lobe, what it does is that it will take a definition of an object and then give you a visual cue of what that object is. That is how the temporal lobe works. So here we go. A plant having a permanently woody main stem, usually growing to a high height and developing branches at some distance from the ground. What is it? It's a tree. So you heard that definition, and you may have had a visual image of a tree. Next one. The nutritious orange to yellow root of a plant of the parsley family. The nutritious orange to yellow root of a plant of the parsley family. Carrot. Next one. An article of furniture consisting of a flat top supported on one or more legs. Table. An institution or instruction is given. An institution or instruction is given. School. Last one. A moving cage for carrying passengers from one level to another. A moving cage for carrying passengers from one level to another. An elevator. Now you're never going to think of an elevator the exact same way ever again. So overall, I wanted to do that activity so you have a better understanding of how the temporal lobe works. So remember, it takes a definition and it puts an image attached to it because it's working with your memories and emotion association along with that. All right, so now let's going to dive into the amygdala and hippocampus. Like I said, this is where gamification thrives. The one thing you should know is that the amygdala is basically controls your emotional responses and helps your brain store memories. And it also works very close to the hippocampus because the hippocampus plays the largest role when it comes to your memory, your navigation, and emotional response. So these are things to remember. Now, one thing I want to tell you is that this is completely subconscious, meaning that you have no idea that these things are happening. The only time where you can question and know what's happening in your brain is when you have messages sent to the prefrontal cortex of your brain. So right in the front of your head, the prefrontal cortex works with logic and reason. So basically figuring out what actions to take or what are some things to think about. So basically, the prefrontal cortex is the only time that you're consciously aware of something that's happening in your brain and what you're thinking of or what you want to do next. So let's first dive into the hippocampus. So the hippocampus, basically, it's where short-term memories are transferred to long-term memories in the temporal lobe. Our conscious memories are formed by the hippocampus, taking a snapshot of a short-term working memory and committing it to a long-term memory stored in the temporal lobe. So the thing to note about is that when you're learning new information, it's going through the hippocampus, and the hippocampus itself starts transmitting it so it becomes a long-term memory, which is stored in your temporal lobe. So there you go. There's some information about your brain. Now, of course, we're going to have to do an activity with the hippocampus because it's important for you to understand how it works. So what I want you to do is I want you to read through this list. So an umbrella, a shoe, a cuddly toy, a melon, a tree, a yogurt, a parrot, a laptop, a red jumper, a basketball. In your mind, read that over twice to yourself in that exact order. Okay, I think you've got enough time. Now, what I want you to do is draft an email or pull up a notes app, and I want you to write down those objects that you basically just saw in the order that they appear. And I'm going to give you 1 whole minute to complete your task. I know that's really hard, but try. So starting, I'm giving you a little bit more here just in case. Okay, hopefully you pulled up your emails or your notes app now. You can write it or you can type it, whatever works best for you. But starting right about now, go. I'm just going to drink my tea while waiting for you guys to write down everything. Keep going. We're halfway there. All right, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Pencils down, pens down, hands up from your keyboard. All right, I know that was hard, but I want to just remind you, the reason why we're doing this activity was because how the hippocampus works is that it takes a short-term memory and tries to make it a long-term memory. It's also when you learn brand new content to store it into a long-term working memory. Now, the thing to remember was that you saw that list at the very beginning, and that list itself was very short. And in a sense that it was a short-term working memory. So you had to, at that moment, reflect on that short-term working memory, working with your hippocampus within your temporal lobe to recognize what things are in order and what were those objects. So let's take a look. How well did you guys do? How many of you guys got it in the right order, or all 10 items in the right order, I should say, or at least did you get 10 of the items? I know if you did, you have a really, really good short-term working memory and a strong hippocampus, so congrats. But if you do struggle with this might be a reason why you might not take in short-term working memories and have a better time plugging into a long-term working memory. So these are things to know. Now, if you ever had to do this ever again, the professionals of memory, short-term working memories, what they tend to do is they make a story. So what they do is they do the objects in appearance, and what they do is they come up with something that's very elaborate, crazy. The more insane you make it, the story be, the more you'll recall it. Now, remember also is that emotions are also associated with the hippocampus. So that's the whole thing. The hippocampus is all about navigating short-term working memories and emotions that are associated with those memories. So, for example, I was walking the street of London and I was carrying an umbrella. And while it's raining outside, I'm carrying this umbrella. I looked down at my shoe and I noticed I almost stepped on this cuddly toy. And now the thing is, though, this cuddly toy, it kind of looked like a melon, or it could have just been a head of a teddy bear that got ripped off somehow, and I couldn't see the actual face. But anyway, I was so focused on that, and I just kept walking. And I looked back like, really, what was that, cuddly toy head or a melon? And I almost walked into a tree. And it wasn't just that, but I also stepped in this really, really bad looking yogurt. And it was like a strawberry looking yogurt, and it was disgusting. But I'm really glad that I looked up at that tree because there was a parrot just sitting in there, just staring at me. But I don't think it was staring at me. I think it was staring into my bag, which has my laptop. Or maybe it was just staring at my red jumper. Or maybe it was staring at that basketball that was really close by. Anyway, you come up with a story that fast in your mind, so you're able to recall the items in the correct orders by giving a story. Sometimes the professionals, what they'll do is they'll think of like a Sharknado in the middle of your story. The thing is, the more crazy you make it, more elaborate, the more specific it is, the more you'll recall. Now, how to improve your hippocampus. Research has shown if you do crossword puzzles, that's right, your granny probably has an incredible memory if she does puzzles. It actually is a really good skill to learn. Taking a new route home, because remember, it's all about navigating. So if you were dropped off like a mile away from your home, anywhere, would you be able to find your place? That's something that you need to practice. Also, gaming modules. Gaming will help you because it's taking a short-term learning education materials and making it into something more of a long-term working memory. Now let's dive into my favorite part of the brain, the amygdala. So the amygdala is connected to your hippocampus because it is the emotion association of your brain. But the one thing you may have known is that almond-shaped section of basically nervous tissues that's located within the temporal side of your brain is responsible for your emotions, your survival instincts. That's really important to understand, survival instincts and memory. And remember, it's a subconscious situation, right? But the thing you need to know about this little part of your brain is that it can cause a lot of chaos. The reason for that is that it does work with your survival. So for example, your fight versus flight mechanism, you may have heard of that before, but it also does separate people from each other. If this person is not like you, or you've never met someone like that type of person before, it's a stranger danger kind of approach. So the thing to know about your amygdala is trying to protect you. It could also constantly be on. So if you're one of those people that definitely deals with anxiety, you probably have a very constant amygdala that's just flashing warnings all the time. But the one thing to note is that the way how the amygdala works is, for example, I have a dream at night. Now, the thing is, though, if I dreamt of just a normal dream, I might not remember all the parts. I might not remember any of it. But if there's a strong emotion associated with that dream itself, I will remember it to the T. So that's how memories work. You know, the things that when you're learning something, if you're passionate about it, you take it in a lot better. The reason for that is there's an emotion attached to that memory or that material. So when we're really excited to learn something, we'll remember it. But if it's something we're not excited about, we might not remember it. So emotion does help. This is why you remember your nightmares more than your other dreams, because it's such a strong emotion, but it's attached to memory. So then you are able to recall that dream itself. So I hope you understand the amygdala, but how it works is that, remember when I was doing that countdown, like 10, 9, 8 in the other example, the activity you just did, that also stimulates your amygdala because it's suddenly freaking out on timing. So there's emotion always associated with timing. So when you're at a countdown, you have to like finish that last item on your quiz. That is when your amygdala kicks in full gear and it's like, you're going to have to do this really fast. So anyway, thing to note is amygdala plays a huge role. But I want you to understand how much. So we're going to do a quick activity. You ready? here we go. We're going to watch this, but I'm going to pause it at 1 to 2 times. All right, so pay attention.
Watch this series of images very closely. Ready? Go. Do you recall seeing any shoes or keys? Probably not. At this speed, 80% of the people we showed this to don't see either the shoes or the keys. We'll slow it down.
Oh, sorry, you guys. That was weird. Hold on. I'll get you right back to that screen. No. Okay, there we go. I think we were right here. Hold on.
Ready?
We'll go back to this. There you go.
Keys? Probably not. At this speed, 80% of the people we showed this to don't see either the shoes or the keys. We'll slow it down. Did you see them this time? You probably did. Now, we're going to play a different...
How many of you guys did it? Did anyone else see it? Now, if you're a red teamer, chances are, or a purple teamer, even a blue teamer, to be honest, you probably did catch that because it's kind of part of your job is you're very detailed oriented. You'll catch little things like that. However, a lot of people outside of our industry would not be able to see that. So congrats, you're special. But let's keep going on this one.
Series of images and test you on them after. Ready? Go. Did you happen to notice any snakes or spiders? Chances are you did. In case you're thinking we slowed down the images, I assure you we did not. All we did was substitute the shoes and keys with pictures of snakes and spiders. Why did one set of images jump out at you while the other didn't? To answer that question...
You don't need him to answer that question. Remember what I said about memory. So, for example, if there is a strong associated memory to an image, that you will recall it as a survival mechanism. So, for example, when you're growing up as a kid, you saw in movies, you read in books that spiders and snakes are somewhat dangerous. And you may have never read that they're dangerous. It's always implied when you watch a movie and the snake comes out and everyone's freaking out. So the reality of it is that there's these things called socially constructed beliefs, and socially constructed beliefs are how we make sense of the world that we live in and the items and the humans and the animals that are in this world. So the thing you need to know about socially constructed beliefs, those are held very tight in your temporal lobe, and it's also where your amygdala is connected. So if it's ever something like a survival situation, you will pick up on that a lot faster because it is your survival mechanism, because it believes that snakes and spiders are dangerous. So it will be heightened. Now, there's this thing called an amygdala hijack. Now, amygdala hijack, how it works is that when it takes over your entire brain, in a sense. Remember the prefrontal cortex, it's the part of your brain that acts rationally using logic and reason before taking actions. Well, when you have an amygdala hijack, what happens is that you don't even think of logic. Logic and reason's out the door. You're freaking out. You're having a panic moment. That's amygdala hijack. So say, for example, usually how it would work is that if you saw a snake or a spider, you would probably think of multiple ways how to remove yourself from that situation if it's like 10 feet or more away from you. Now, say, for example, that snake is actually 1 foot away from you. You might have an amygdala hijack at that moment because it's closer. You don't have time to have logic and reasoning. You just act. You have to for survival reasons. That's the difference between amygdala hijack and not having an amygdala hijack is timing. Timing is the essence, but also to note what you're going to end up doing. Now, the other thing to note is that amygdala hijacks can also happen in a car accident. So if you're in a really bad car accident, you might remember this, is that suddenly everything seems like slow motion. Now, this is what happens when amygdala hijack works. It suddenly feels like time is not existing at that moment because it's slowing down, but it's really you rapidly trying to decide what to do next. And it takes the first option that comes to mind. And usually these are things that you've prepped for. For example, you might have dreams of like what to do in a type of scenario, and it uses those moments to replay that moment and say, this is the action we're taking. So you're not able to break down 5 actions. Instead, you're only taking one action that is the most common one that you have diagnosed as the go-to option always. So the amygdala is really interesting. It's a fascinating part of your brain. But that's how the amygdala works also in gamification. It has a lot to do with timing, emotional response, and whatnot. So we dived into your brain. Now I want to go into how gamification helps security teams. So first things first, what you need to understand is that I truly believe, and also research has shown, that certs and years of experience does not make you amazing at your job. It's what you are as a person, your tenacity, your grit, your drive that makes you amazing at your job. And the thing is that the other thing to be realistic about it is that there's new tools, exploits that come out all the time, and being aware of everything at all hours and whatnot, what are the trends. This is a lot of issues because this could lead to burnout and a lack of team members, because let's be honest, we're all stretched very thin on a security team because we wish there was other people on our team because it's a lot of weight and responsibility on us. But the thing to note is that when you have a shortage on your team, what ends up happening is someone has to take over that role on top of their role. And they may not know all those things and those items, and they might not be as talented on that area. So you're always finding yourself having to wear multiple hats. And this is a huge problem. So I definitely do believe that gamification is definitely one of the ways how to try to resolve that scenario. And how the reasoning behind it is why gamification is thriving in security is because they've realized that it is something that would help on these situations. So first things first, what Gartner said, and it really did take it out of my mind on this one, is that in 2020, gamification combined with other latest technologies and trends will have a significant impact on the design of employee performance, globalization of higher education, and innovation. And honestly, this is true. We're in 2020 and it's definitely doing that. So that's the good news. But let's dive into further facts, shall we? So first things first, fact number 1. Within organizations that hold gamification exercises, hackathons, capture the flags and whatnot, or red team, blue team, bug bounty programs, 96% of those that use gamification in the workplace notice seeing some serious good benefits out of it. And then fact number 2 is that more than half, 57% of respondents report that using games increases the awareness of IT and staff knowledge of how breaches can occur. And 43% said gamification enforces a teamwork culture needed for a quick and effective cybersecurity. Now, 77% of senior managers agree they would be safer if they used more gamification. Fact number 3. We are still at a 3 million shortage, and this has something to do with the fact that we gatekeep here. Let's be real. We are terrible industry because we gatekeep people. But the other thing is that we have all these other issues with that. There's not enough people that actually knows this stuff either. So to address that shortage in skilled, security workers, reports have suggested that gamers, those that are engaged and immersed in online competitions, may be logical next step to plug in the gap. That's right. So people that have no security background at all, if they're gamers, they might be the next person to look into and tap on their shoulder. Because nearly all, 92% of respondents do believe that gaming affords players experience and skills critical to cybersecurity threat hunting, such as logic, perseverance, and understanding of how to approach adversaries, and a fresh outlook compared to traditional cybersecurity hires. Fact number 4, 77% of employees find game-based training to be more effective than traditional training methods. This makes complete sense, right? How many of you guys recall anything that you read in a textbook? Okay, granted, you probably remember some stuff here and there, but you don't take in more than 80% usually. And that's the reality, is that once we stop using that memory, we kind of forget about it. The reality is that when we use something that immerses a person into that ecosystem, it really does help. It gives us a better idea what to look for, also how to react. The more realistic we can make a breach situation occur at our company, the more we have a better ability to fighting and being prepped for if there was a breach. That's why practicing is so important, and gamification does do that. Also, gamification does help find talent and recognition. I kid you not. Remember that whole gatekeeping thing? Biases are so real in our industry. I kid you not. You know what happened? I'll give you an example. So I decided to do a test. And in this test, I had 2 resumes. One with my name, the other one with the name Cody. Now, the thing to note about it was that I wanted to see what would be the difference, exact same resume, but I wanted to see the difference if I applied as a male versus a female. And what ended up happening was that I got way more callbacks for Cody than for myself. Exact same resume. But because I had a masculine name, suddenly they took me more seriously, because there's still this belief and stigma that women face that we're not technical enough or that we're not leaders enough. And that's a problem, because that means we're gatekeeped out of having more than a manager title. That also means that gatekeeps us from having an entry-level job. That gatekeeps us in so many other ways. So it's very real that biases exist when it comes to the hiring. And it's not just that, but also it's really, really silly that we still use really out-of-date fashion ways of looking at applicants. What I mean is that sometimes we just look for certain certs and years of experience and determine that person is a good person to have in that seat without ever testing them out. That's going to run into a huge situation, because you might think that person has everything perfect on their resume, but when you put them in the actual position, they may not know actually how to do that role that well. And that becomes a huge issue, because then you have to hire someone else and replace that. And it's so costly, and it's so much time and resources. It's scary. So that's why it's so important is to test them out. So imagine where you apply, and when you apply, they're not looking at your resume or years of experience or the certs you have, because let's be honest, certs are so expensive. And that's another reason that we're gatekeeping people, because they can't afford it. So think about it in this way. When you apply, you get put into a testing place to test you if you actually have those skill set. And then from there, then you go into the interviewing process. First, test you on your ability, because that is how you know they're able to do that job. Not resumes, the ability. Test them out ahead of time. Because I'll tell you one thing, we launched this thing called talent screening, and majority of those that participate in it, the people that tended to do better were people that were underrepresented in the community, the meaning of people of color, women. They were more likely to be hired and go into the interview process by actually being tested if they have the abilities before being looked at what their resume looks like. And the people that tend to be perfect on their resume don't actually correlate that they have the ability to do that role. So imagine if we took away the whole resume, what's on there at first test you out, and then have the interview process. That would reduce gatekeeping. It also help improve and figure out who is better on the team. Because I can tell you one thing, when you see like, and I hate to be honest with you guys, but it's something you need to know, is that when you see like a cis white man just keep getting promoted over and over, when you're the top performer on the team as a woman, or even if you're a person of color, you see it happen all the time, because the recognition is still based around these human biases that we carry, that white males are better than anyone else. And that's a scary thing, because that's not true at all. And those people that are underrepresented are not being promoted, because human biases prevent that from happening, because we are unchecked with our human biases, because some of us don't look at ourselves to see, what am I doing that's hurting the situation? Or am I taking the time to get to know what is going on in my company? Am I practicing diversity and inclusion? And chances are you're probably not. And so this is why it's important to understand is that we need to change us as an industry, because the shortage of skills, that's one thing, but it's also because you're not hiring people that are underrepresented. You're not promoting people that are underrepresented because you still have biases that prevent them from excelling in this industry. And what ends up happening is they leave our industry because they're not being recognized. And that's so sad. So gamification is definitely one thing I can tell you helps dramatically to try to increase diversity and inclusion, but also it cuts down on the time of entering. It also cuts down on resources. It cuts down on time, resources, and then also cost a lot on that front. But you get to hire the actual person that can do that role. And you know that human biases are not playing a role anymore. That's what I want to see in our industry, because it's so sad when I hear more and more people not getting promoted, or also when they can't even get in the door of our industry because we're preventing them, because we're not facing the facts, or gatekeeping. And so I do believe gamification definitely affords that, but also it helps train them if they're missing anything a lot faster than normal, traditional ways of doing it. And like I said, we do have a skills gap. I mean, once again, certs are not enough. It will get you in the door if it's your entry level job, perhaps, but it doesn't do more than that. I mean, your certs did not make you amazing at what you do. You did. Your background, everything that you have done in your life is made you so amazing at your job. It wasn't from a cert. Granted, it gives you some more knowledge, but the reality is what you do, the actions that you take, the tasks that you do and you complete. That is how you do your job well. It's not certs, not years of experience. It's just the ability that you have in you. Now, the other thing to know about the skills gaps is that gamification does give you a way to learn something rapidly fast and to be able to execute that new skills. And sometimes we have to learn other skills because we're stretched thin on our security team, or we lost a member on our security team, and then we have to take on some of their roles. So we have to learn the skills that they are good at really fast. And so that's how gamification can work, is you have gamified modules that train you to upskill and for you to learn new skills. And that's really important, because if we don't train ourselves, we're going to have a skills gap. But it also will put us in a situation, if we don't find a way how to learn it rapidly fast, it could end up having a burnout, because learning a new skill without like a gamified way, it takes a lot more time, and we don't have that much time usually to learn something new. And this can lead us to having burnout because we don't even know where to even begin to learn a new skill. But also, when we have skills gaps on our team and not knowing where our skill gap lays, that's another scary thing. So you want to make sure that you have an idea of how everyone's performing on your team, what are the skills that are missing on your team, or the skills that they're very strong in. Knowing that is so critical to prevent breaches. Now, fact number 7, the military is all in. And we know this because gamified learning environments are powerful tools for engaging and motivating learning experiences. They are an essential component of cybersecurity training strategies, which is a national imperative when it comes to the military. Such environments help produce qualified personnel to meet the demand signal as soon as possible. In other words, strong correlations between gaming and cybersecurity activities, gaming and retention, and gaming and recruitment. And last but not least, this is my favorite one. I hate when people use compliance checklists as their way of preventing breaches. That is definitely nothing. That is just the bare minimum that you must have. We need to invest in our people. And that is the one takeaway I can tell you, is that invest in your security team. Invest in them having a gamified platform where they can upskill, because it's great for them to know these things. And it's important that you invest in your team. That also means allowing them to take time off when needed for mental health breaks. 2020 has been a crazy year, and mental health is on the horizon. And the thing is that compliance checklist doesn't check out if your team is burned out. It doesn't check in on mental health or education or what you're missing, what skills are missing on our security team. They don't do that. And so that's the problem, is that it doesn't always prevent breaches. there's a human element here in play. So if you want to prevent breaches, invest in your security people, because you wouldn't have a product nor a company if you didn't have them. And it's important that we get that out there to people that aren't in security, that have decision over budget, because it must be very hard to be a CISO, trying to convince people like, I need more budget because you guys are giving more money to sales and marketing, but you won't have a product if you don't invest in your security too. So kudos to CISOs out there. I know it's hard. And last but not least, what percentage of companies that adopt gamification in the workplace report seeing benefits? Does anyone remember? Write it in. What percentage? 96%. Now, how gamification has transformed lives, I definitely, when working in bug bounty scene, hearing the stories that they ended up getting jobs because they started doing bug bounty, they became pen testers at a company, and it transformed their life, where they didn't have the funds to get certs or anything like that. But instead, what they did is they participated in bug bounty and then showed the ones that they could, so publicly, bug bounty programs, and showing that they found the following type of bugs, and they were accepted by these following big companies. It helped them get their foot in the door because they had the experience and they showed they have the skills. And so that's why one of the reasons that, certs are great and everything, but showing you have the ability of doing it, that's another thing. That's something that no matter how many years of experience you have, you need to showcase that. So we're going to talk about two people that I know that their lives got completely changed because of gamification in InfoSec. So the first person I want to talk to you guys about is Veronica. So Veronica got a BA in computer science by accident. She was planning to actually study Latin and Greek, but was also taking a computer science class and fell in love with it. But the thing is that when leaving college, she had somewhat of an interest of getting a PhD, but at the same time, she wanted to take a break first. So she did some youth development work for 5 years after graduating in Chicago, and she loved it, but it didn't change. I guess it didn't challenge her enough, and it didn't inspire or empower her. But she did come across, there was a partnership with the DoD boot camp that drew her to it. And they were looking for people that had the ability of, and I kid you not, is that the description of getting into this boot camp, it literally just asks these following questions. Do you have problem-solving ability? Are you able to look at problems work on problems for a long time? Do you have willingness to have disciplined learning? And if you say yes on all those, then you can apply. That's all it was. It wasn't asking, do you have any computer science background? None of that. Just, are you a problem solver? Are you one of those people that's trying to break something apart to understand it more? Can you discipline yourself in learning? And so she came across it and was like, yeah, exactly. I would love to do this, because she loved, I kid you not, loved working with patterns and puzzles. Like everything about it was her favorite thing to do on the side. So she got accepted into this boot camp, and she started out with reverse engineering challenges on Escalate. And afterwards, within 6 months, she worked at a consulting company, basically being a technology consultant, but it's more like a pen tester. And then afterwards, she joined Point 3 Security because it was a partnership with the company itself. And they saw that she did really, really well within 6 months, and that they wanted to bring her over. And and that is how it worked, was that she had absolutely no background at all about security at all. But she went into this boot camp and she learned within 6 months how to be a pen tester. See, possibilities there with gamification. But the one thing that was really interesting when I was talking to her was that she's like, if I went through my Google search history, I would see how I always was looking for web app strategies and how can one manipulate or change in shape. She was like, I just never knew that this was a field for me. Valentina is another good one. So Valentina, she first studied psychology, but she was not a fan of math. She hated math. But yet she had to take one math class in college, and she realized, oh, so this is actually math, not the stuff that they were teaching me in school. And she fell in love with it. And so she decided to study math at UIC. And as an undergrad, she did an internship for the physics department, but she had to learn some basic coding and took a class in computer science to learn a little bit more on it. Afterwards, she ended up being an economist for the Federal Reserve Bank, but she really discovered a passion in computers when she was doing that internship. And so she said, like, the ability to tell a computer what to do and build anything was something really empowering. And so she was kind of like, she was still thinking about computers. She really missed it. And being an economist, she didn't feel like was her job for her. And she was thinking, maybe I should go into computer security, possibly, and because it sounded interested. And she really, really, really fell in love with the hacking world. And the reason she said that was because she saw the movie Hackers. And when she saw Hackers, she's like, I feel like I fit in with these characters. Like I feel like I'm part of that type of community. And that's when she started falling more into the early computer internet culture in the hacker community image. And so she started learning more about it. And then she realized maybe this is her actual field of interest should be. So she came across a press release from the mayor of Chicago saying that they were running a boot camp with the DoD and they were taking applications for those that are underrepresented in the space to come and learn to become security people. She applied, she got accepted, she got a spot, and she had zero experience in computer security. But within 3 months of the 6-month boot camp, she was hired immediately as a software developer position, and then she became a vulnerability researcher, which is fascinating because it was this gamified boot camp that allowed her to really figure out how to get these skills in a really fast amount of time. So the other thing to note is that I've heard so many other stories of other people where gamification helped them get their foot in the door or to promote themselves at their work and whatnot. So if you have a story, let me know because I would love to hear it. And maybe I'll feature it into my talk next time. But the last pop quiz question, if anyone can write it in, is which person was inspired by the movie Hackers that I gave you examples of how gamification transformed their lives? Who was that person? Valentina. So from stories, brain functioning, and history, it is so clear that gamification is a necessity right now. So we can all be superheroes every day because that is what you guys do. You are a superhero behind scenes and no one really understands or sees that, unfortunately, and I hope that changes soon because you guys keep everyone safe. So here are some resources if you want to learn a little bit more. The ITSP magazine podcast link is there. The Hacker Book Club. If you want to join us, we read technical and non-technical books that are written by the hacker community. And the hacker community, we all read it together. And also the author does join us. And those that are mentioned in the book also join. That is a hacker rights petition. If you want to sign it, fantastic. Basically to push for hacker rights because we don't have any. So go ahead, take a look at that. And if you're interested in learning more about where I work, the link is right there. I will take questions. I'm going to turn off my slides and so I can look at everything that's happening in the chat because I can't see it. But I just want to say thank you guys so much for existing. And I hope everyone is well and staying safe. Please wear a mask and know that you're not alone or isolated. If you ever want to be in touch with some resources or anything, like, feel free to message me. My DMs are always open. But I just want to say thank you guys so much for existing. And thank you for being wonderful people. And thank you for being in the hacker community because we need each other right now more than ever.
Yeah. And thank you for presenting today. And there are no questions yet.
Okay.
But there are a couple of comments. One is hack the planet.
I love it.
Also, I will also think of elevators as cages now. Thank you.
Now you understand when people are like freaking out getting in the elevator or being stuck in the elevator, they're thinking of actual cage. And I never thought about that until I found that definition. But, Tommy Adams, if you can DM me on Twitter, I will send you over a special gift for you.
And then you can see the gamification is literally the CTF 313 business model from Sean.
Yeah, CTFs will definitely help you upskill and game, and it's a lot of fun too.
Oh yeah, just the learning process, yeah. And then when you finally, it's like that moment of like Zen when you figure it out. You're just like ah.
So
Then you're super excited.
Yeah, I found it. But yeah.
Let's see. I also have a comment about resumes. I often scroll to the bottom of the resume first to see any extra curricular activities the person is doing, especially when hiring for pen testers. It's so competitive. I get so many resumes that I can almost always eliminate a resume based on that activity or lack of that activity. Bug bounties are a huge plus on a resume for that side.
Yeah, definitely on that. Yeah, I do. I love that you went to the bottom of the resume to look at the extracurricular activities, because usually we'll look for CTFs if you participate in CTFs at all, or if you do game like any type of bug bounty is also really good to do.
We also have what's the current Hacker Book Club book?
So we just wrapped up Tanya Jenka's new book. So we are going to start in January with Phil Wiley, and also I'm having a huge, I cannot remember a name right now. Kim Crawley. There we go. The Pen Tester's Blue Handbook, I believe it's called. The Pen Tester's Handbook. I'm terrible with names on a Friday, but we're going to be doing that one. But you can check on our URL. It does state which book is coming up that we'll be reading in January.
All right, with that, I don't see any other questions. So
excellent.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for having me. This is fun. I hope to see you everyone in Detroit one day soon.
Maybe I would love to say that we'll see everybody next year, but I feel like that's probably not going to happen.
Let's cross fingers, you know.
Yep. All right. Well, thank you again, and have a wonderful day.
Yeah. Thank you. Bye, everyone.